Hi, welcome to Sustain Talks, the podcast crafted to enlighten individuals and businesses on the path to becoming more sustainable and socially responsible. I'm Sam Candy, CEO of Responsible Futures, an organisation that supports businesses through consulting and training. Today, I am delighted to be in conversation with Kayleigh Lee-Simion. She's the Technical Manager, Plastics and ESG Disclosure at CDP. Kayleigh is a circular economy expert working to transform systems away from the take, make, waste model, and at CDP leads the development of a cutting-edge plastics disclosure framework for corporates to take action to reduce plastic pollution and waste. I'm so looking forward to getting into this conversation and learning more about what you do. Hi, Kayleigh, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Sam, for your introduction. So brilliant introduction. But yes, I'm Kayleigh. I work for CDP. I'm the technical manager of plastics. So this framework is very, very exciting. It's to get corporates to really measure, manage, and reduce their plastic-related impacts. You can't manage what you can't measure. And it's very, very important that corporates, although at the beginning of a lot of corporates are at the beginning of their plastics journey and the circularity journey at the moment, it's a huge issue. We're seeing a lot of regulations incoming on it. We're seeing a lot of consumer awareness of the issue. Very excited to be here today to talk to you about this.
Oh, good. For the audience, can you just tell us a little bit as well about your background and how you got into sustainability? And also, I think it'd be good to speak a little bit more about what CDP is, because I'm not sure if everyone knows.
Yes, definitely. So I'll take you first right back. I have always worked in sustainability for my whole career. I always wanted to do something which I felt like I was having a positive impact on the world, the planet, society. So sustainability was the obvious choice. My career started out initially at a very small event sustainability organization called Positive Impact Events. And here we really try to get event professionals to think about the impact of these huge exhibitions, which have people flying in from all over the world, have a lot of waste often in the the layout, the structures that they make. Almost every exhibit will have a new I don't know what you call it. A new like pod,
Yeah.
each company, a new stand, yeah. So that was great. Here we worked with the UNFCCC for a net zero framework for the event sector, also worked with UNICEF UK on considering human and child rights for events as well. So that was what was very interesting. And then I moved on to a consultancy called Eunomia Research and Consulting. And it was here where we did a lot of work on quite influential circular economy policy projects. Here I worked on the packaging and packaging waste regulation, leading the stakeholder engagement for it. So really understanding how this regulation can affect different industries. Pharmaceuticals have very, very strict rules on what can be included in their packaging. I also worked on designing an extended producer responsibility scheme for textiles, which informed the strategy for sustainable and circular textiles in the EU. So this was a very innovative project. There's EPR schemes for packaging, but for textiles is not as widespread. But it's a huge issue. Fast fashion, creates an awful lot of waste and isn't very well regulated yet. So that was a very exciting project. And I also worked with the Singaporean government on designing their deposit return scheme, which was the first of its kind in Southeast Asia. So now I'm at CDP, where, as mentioned, I lead the development of our plastics disclosure framework. So 2023 was the first year of our plastics disclosure framework, and we had just under 3,000 corporates disclosed to us with a combined market cap of 25 trillion. So very large companies are interested and trying to reduce their plastics impacts, and it's my job to make sure that we always push the ambition and reduce the plastic impacts across the whole value chain. And yes, so CDP started about 20 years ago. Originally, it was called Carbon Disclosure Project. Now we go by CDP, and we are the world's largest environmental platform of voluntary disclosed data. So we have questionnaires on different themes, including climate change, forest, water, plastics, and biodiversity. And our kind of motto is, one, you can't manage what you can't measure. As I said again, you'll probably hear that quite a few times in this podcast. But also we align with different standards and frameworks out there, including ESRS, TNFD, GRI, to make sure that almost to reduce the reporting burden on corporates, to make sure that corporates, when they disclose to us, they have the data for all these different frameworks as well. We call it write once, use many. So that is us. We have roughly about 30,000 corporates disclosing to us every year. We have corporates disclosing to us, but we also have a questionnaire for SMEs. We also have a questionnaire for cities, states, and regions. So our whole ethos is increasing transparency and therefore accountability of these organizations of reducing their environmental impacts.
Yeah, that's great. Such a great career already, and you've really sort of found your niche in materials, it seems. And I find with CDP, it's great for frameworks for companies that are looking to make their supply chain more sustainable. And actually, as a consultancy, we're seeing a lot more requests for companies that want to follow that framework. So really, really great work there. I'm interested in the materials bit. I think from one of my LinkedIn posts, we came across each other, and there seems to be, with all sustainability, there always seems to be so much confusion around what's sustainable and what isn't. In your view, and from your very well varied experience, what do you think is the most sustainable packaging, and why do you think that?
Yeah, thanks. That's a difficult question for sure. I think packaging is a tough one because a lot of the time it's contextual. The impacts of the packaging often depends on the recycling infrastructure in that region. It could depend on how far the packaging has had to travel to get to where you purchase it. It can depend on a whole lot of things. Even what it is containing could affect the how sustainable it is. For example, if there's dried beans or dried grains, right? I would say a flexible plastic packaging is clearly unsustainable because as we see a lot in, I think M&S have started it now as well. You can get that in bulk and you can just fill up your own jars. So flexible packaging is not very necessary for a product such as that. Whereas for a product that could go off, like fruit or veg, perhaps you would want something that can contain it. So a very tricky question. In terms of the waste infrastructure, in our questionnaire, we describe recyclability in two different ways. Technically recyclable, so given the recycling infrastructure, so given how it's produced, could it technically be recyclable? As in, are there recycling technology out there somewhere in the world that could technically recycle it, but may not necessarily be in the region which you're placing that product on the market? And then we describe it as recycling in practice and at scale. And this is a term that Ellen MacArthur Foundation established. And this is the criteria is the recycling of your packaging, the recycling rate of your packaging, 30% in a region of 400 million. So kind of in all the regions that you place on the market, so Europe, America, Asia, APAC, is recycling at least 30%. And this is a term to describe, okay, it may be technically recyclable, but is the waste infrastructure there? Is the collection, sorting, and recycling infrastructure there? Does the majority of people who may buy your packaging, if they put it in their bin at home, does it actually get recycled? Because the facilities are available. So this is a very tricky question in terms of how far the packaging needs to travel. A heavier packaging obviously contributes more to carbon emissions. So, if you change packaging from plastic to glass, but then you're shipping that glass or you're flying that glass halfway across the world, I would be hesitant because the carbon emissions would increase significantly. So lots and lots of things to think about. And it is not an easy question. And I do think it depends on a lot of different things. But I would say in general, the best packaging is one that is reusable. So one that means you can refill it up, one that means you can take your own jars to the store and get your goods. And there's lots of different ways that reusable packaging can be created. There's four really. There's refill at home. And this means you may have seen a lot of brands are doing it now with soap. So you buy a big packaging of soap and you just refill it at home. And this is great because it reduces the amount of packaging used. So instead of buying 3 different bags of packaging, you're just buying one big bag, and that reduces the amount of plastic needed. So that's a refill at home. There's refill on the go, which often looks like kind of like coffee machines where you take your own coffee cup to the store and refill it. There's also return at home and return on the go. So return at home would mean a system in which the company would send people to collect the packaging and take it back to the store and then wash it, refill it. And then return on the go could look like in Superdrug, a lot of the time they have a return your makeup packaging. I've seen that in some places. So that looks usually like specific packaging that you can't put in your general recycling bin. You take to the store and you return it, and likewise they process it, clean it out, refill it. So that's kind of the 4 types of reuse models. And I would say in general, reuse is the best. The longer we can keep materials in use at their highest value, so not downcycling, if you will, into something that has a lower value and then maybe can't be recycled again. The longer we can keep materials in use for longer at the highest value, it is better, because every time we produce new materials, often from virgin content, we create a whole host of environmental impacts on the climate, impacts on water use. With plastics, of course, there's a lot of chemicals involved in producing them, which are hazardous to human health, and that could potentially be in the packaging that we use. So in general, the less we create, the less we produce, the better. And reusable packaging is the way to go with that.
That's brilliant. And it's interesting when I listen to you, it is so complex. There's not just one answer that fits every single solution. So depending on the company, if it's as you say, if it's wine, is it better in glass or plastic? But then it depends how far it's going. If it's paper, can that paper be recycled? So the different types of packaging, it really depends on the product. I know often have the conversation in supermarkets that say, for example, cucumbers are being placed in plastic, but then they last much longer. So when does that work better? If you're looking at for people that are walking around supermarkets and they're thinking, oh, I don't want that because it's wrapped in a plastic, but then it's going to last a lot longer. Is it better to have it in with glass? Is it better? Paper obviously means that we're cutting down trees. Plastics are, can't always be reused and can't always be recycled. And then glass is obviously much heavier. So how do you? There's so many different pros and cons with each product, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. And even though there's a lot of different pros and cons, there's different aspects you can look into to try and make each material as sustainable as possible. For example, paper. Yes, we do have to cut down trees for it, but equally, paper is very easy to be recycled. So if you look for paper packaging that has a high amounts of recycled content, you're reducing the impact on the environment. Or if you make sure that your company uses paper from responsible sources, so sources of the paper fiber, which is managed responsibly, as in doesn't contribute to deforestation and doesn't degrade the environment, then that reduces the impact. Glass, equally, very easy to be recycled. High recycled content in a lot of glass packaging, which is important. And then I think I'm practical. Plastic was invented to create this barrier for a lot of food waste, although it is quite high. Usually it isn't because it gets spoiled like it used to. Like you said, the flexible packaging around a cucumber does keep it for longer, especially in transit and distribution. So plastic does have its uses. I think what is really important is that we reduce how much we're using it at the moment. And if the cucumbers are going to go off, maybe it's looking at another part of the supply chain. Maybe it's looking at, do we need to ship it from South America, or can we actually get it from somewhere closer, from
Yeah.
somewhere more local? And then for that, you're reducing the amount of cucumbers which may go off, but you're also in decreasing your food miles, the carbon emissions from that, as well as supporting local businesses. So as we said, it's such a complex issue and there's so many different factors to look at. But I think small progress is still progress.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes down to single-use plastics,
Mhm.
which is very difficult, there's so much of it out there. But how can companies and individuals reduce their impact on single use?
Yeah, so single-use plastic is probably one of the most well-known issues of plastic at the moment. I think we've all seen the picture of the turtle with the rings around his neck, and it contributes significantly to pollution. I like to think about it in terms of the waste hierarchy, or the three R's that some people like to call it: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Or we also have if you go into a bit more detail, redesign tends to be at the top. So you can have reduce, rethink, redesign, reuse, recycle. Um, so I think the first thing that a lot of companies should do when they look at the single-use plastics they use is, do they actually need it? What purpose is it serving in a business? Is it for takeaways if they're a food and beverage company, or sorry, like hospitality company? Are they producing? Are they buying single-use plastics so their customers can take away food? Is it beverage cups? Is it what is it, and is it necessary? As in, do they significantly think that they're going to lose a lot of business if they don't use it? So I think the first thing is, can you eliminate it? Can you eliminate it? Because the best single-use plastic is the one not used at all. If they can't, and they do need something that operates in this way, that has this function, can we redesign it? Does it need to be made out of the plastic which is currently made of, which may reduce the recyclability? Can they procure or produce it from another material which increases the recyclability of it, or increases recyclability or compostability, or can it be substituted to another material? So that would be, I guess, the rethink, redesign. Reuse is, I suppose, not so relevant to this conversation because single-use plastic by definition is not reusable. But can you change your system so you could make it reusable? Can you offer refills, for example, and encourage your customers to bring their own cups? Can we create a reverse logistics system, for example, with your suppliers, in which that they take back the single-use packaging and reuse it again and again? So there's innovations that can happen. And then, like I said, recycling is, a lot of people think that's the first thing to think about. First, we should think about recycling. How can we increase the single-use plastics that we send to recycling? But it's actually not. It's almost, I wouldn't say a last resort, but it's further down the hierarchy than people realize. 80% of a product's impacts are determined in the design phase. So really, you want to think way further up the chain before it even gets to disposal, and think, okay, how can we reduce the impacts here, not at the end of a life?
Yeah. Do you think that and actually that was the post that we'd connected on, because I was speaking to a local bakery and they were saying that they have to put their cakes in clear plastic because when they had them on platters, people weren't buying them, but when they were in takeaways and they could see them, that they would buy them more. But then they looked into the recyclable ones and they were so much more expensive. Do you think the pricing is going to come down, or there's going to be certain taxes that are put into plastics? What's your views on that?
Yeah, so I think definitely at the moment, at the current point in time, being sustainable when it comes to packaging usually has a larger cost.
Mm.
And a lot of corporates are able to absorb this cost because they're large businesses. But for smaller businesses, it's very, very hard. And this is where I think of circular economy as a whole systems transformation that we need. And that includes policy. We do need kind of policy that supports recycled content being cheaper, that penalizes the overproduction of virgin plastics. And there is policy kind of incoming on that, but more can be done. So extend and produce responsibility, as I mentioned earlier, what this does is it means that producers who place on the market unsustainable products, and this can look a number of ways. It could be due to the recyclability. For example, colored PET is often has higher fees to place on the market than clear because that affects the recyclability. Or products made with only virgin plastic and no recycled content, that will cost more to place on the market. And this is a great scheme because it means the polluter pays for what they're placing on the market. The onus is on the producer as opposed to, the rest of society, which I think is important. I think it's right as well, because ultimately they're the ones deciding to place it on the market. And these fees can then contribute to making, so you have a kind of a pool of money from this, which can then go towards recycled content innovations. It can go towards increasing the waste infrastructure. It can go towards lifting up and funding the other aspects, which are really important to generate more recycled content, to reduce pollution, for example. So that is a really great political tool, kind of a financial mechanism, I suppose, to reduce the price of recycled content, to ensure that it's not financially sustainable to keep producing very polluting virgin plastic, which is not in line with circular economy principles. Another tax or levy that a lot of countries do is kind of a levy on single-use plastic. So making it, again, if you want to produce a single-use plastic, you can, but you have to pay. And it really hits corporates kind of where it hurts. It hits producers where it hurts because it reduces the financial incentive to produce these polluting materials. And then there is also, this isn't in force, but it's been talked about, especially in the Global Plastics Treaty, where it's kind of like a virgin polymer tax. So a tax on the amount of virgin polymers you produce. And I think this this starts with making it financially unsustainable to produce single-use plastics, to produce virgin plastics. And as a result, it will make it more financially sustainable to create create recycled content, to create products with high recycled content, with high recyclability. And I think as this becomes more and more agreed upon across different countries, that will affect the whole market for plastic. So as a result, and hopefully we haven't seen it yet, but hopefully eventually we will start to see it, that recycled content is not double, triple the price of virgin content. And that's really important because right now it costs a lot more, and being sustainable shouldn't cost a lot more. You may have an initial upfront investment, but it shouldn't be double, triple the price to procure packaging with recycled content when virgin packaging is way cheaper, given all the environmental impacts of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I hope that it's something that comes in soon. But I do see that companies are taking more responsibility themselves because actually they want to be seen by the customer to be more sustainable, and customers are choosing more sustainable products because that's what they want in their lives. And then hopefully that will push them towards making changes in their product because they know that that's what the customer wants. Can you explain a little bit about the plastics disclosure framework and how that helps companies to manage their plastic use?
Yes, of course. So at CDP, like I said, 2023 was the first year, 2024, and this year we expanded it slightly, and we're going to keep developing it to cover all the aspects of managing your plastic. Well, hopefully. So what we ask for, we have qualitative questions and quantitative questions. The qualitative questions are integrated with the other themes. So what this means is that plastic is seen at the same level as climate, as water and forest, which is great to really drive up the view of corporates of managing their impacts holistically. So the qualitative questions are things around your dependencies and impacts, risks and opportunities related to plastics, which is quite a common way of identifying where your business can be impacted by it and what you can do to mitigate that. It includes questions on value chain engagement. Do you have kind of a criteria for your suppliers on plastic pollution and waste? What is it? Do you support your suppliers to then support their suppliers to reduce their plastic pollution and waste? And this is a very powerful tool to kind of create change across the whole supply chain. And then we also have quantitative questions, and this goes more into the detail of what your plastic actually contains. So we have questions on the raw material content of your polymers, plastic packaging, and durable goods and products, if it's relevant to you. We also have a question on the circularity potential of your packaging. What percentage is reusable and what percentage is recyclable in practice and at scale and technically recyclable? And then this year in 2024, we created an end-of-life management question. So now our questionnaire covers the full life cycle, the full value chain of plastics, from production, commercialization, usage, all the way to when it becomes waste at end of life. So this question asks for how much waste do you generate from your operations, and where is it going? What percentage of that is going to be reused or recycled, all the way down to landfill, mismanaged waste and leakage. And this is in line with the waste hierarchy, starting with reuse, recycling, and then landfill and mismanaged waste, meaning it ends up in the environment. So we ask corporates these questions And I forgot to mention, raw material content is the percentage of virgin content, percentage of renewable content, and pre and post consumer recycled content. So the idea behind this is to really ask corporates, A, do they know what the plastics they're using contains? Do they know the recyclability of it? Do they know where it's going once they throw it away, which is very, very important. But it's also to support corporates to, once you have this information, you've spent a couple months gathering this data, you can use that data to continuously improve your sustainability. So I find that based on how much reporting is there at the moment, you have some people, some companies that view it as a tick box exercise, spend a couple months to gather this data, they're compliant, forget about it until the next reporting cycle comes around. Then you have other corporates that are really using this data to continuously improve. To say that, okay, look, last year in our questionnaire, our percentage of recycled content was X percent. We refined our processes. We looked at our supply chain. We did some innovation. This year, it has increased. So to use that data to really track your progress is really, really important. And yeah, we have seen a quite big appetite for plastics. Like I mentioned, in our first year, we did have quite a few, just under 3,000 corporates disclosing to us. And this year, for 2025, our next disclosure cycle, we're continuously updating the questions and adding new ones based on our consultation with the industry of what they think is important to manage and measure and reduce.
Yeah, it's great to hear that it's being adopted by so many companies. And, I always find with clients the learnings from going through the carbon footprint with them, that the things that they learn, they're always surprised when they get the results that one thing had more of an impact than something else that they thought had a higher impact. So once you really look into that data and that discovery, it really can be enlightening. Do you have any success stories of where companies have created more recycled products or circular packaging? Something that you can share that we can hear about.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of innovation happening in the industry at the moment. I have a really nice case of the redesign aspect of the waste hierarchy that I mentioned, and we saw a company. I think it was a toothpaste tube, which is flexible packaging, very difficult to recycle, and often has a lot of layers as well. So this toothpaste initially was a multi-material, multi-layer packaging, and flexible. So multi-material, multi-layer means that it has very thin, different layers of different materials and polymers all stuck together, which is incredibly difficult to separate out, which means you really can't recycle it. You need to recycle products per polymer, per material, and if it's such a thin layer all stuck together, it's pretty much impossible. So this company innovated, did a lot of material design in order to create a toothpaste tube that was 100% mono material. So they were able to do this. To be honest, I don't know the ins and outs of how they did it. It seemed like a very complicated, very material science R&D and innovation. But basically, from transforming their multi-material, multi-layer tube to 100% mono material, that meant it can be recycled now in to produce incredibly high quality recycled content that they can then reuse in their monomaterial tube. So this was such a fascinating innovation, because when you hear about companies changing from multi-material to monomaterial, I never thought of a toothpaste tube ever.
No, I'm listening to you and I'm like, I never even thought about that.
Yeah. And when they told me about it, it just kind of clicked. I was like, everyone uses toothpaste. You know, how many toothpaste tubes get thrown away all the time? And it was a great innovation. So transitioning from multi-material to mono-material in a product that is often not recyclable is what was another success story that I heard. I also was told about this company who they disclosed to us. This one's slightly different, but what they did is they created a return a returnable scheme, a return scheme for their drinks. They're large corporate, so they had the capacity to go around and return and pick up these bottles, um, reuse it, wash it out, reuse it, and then refill it again. And I found this quite fascinating because they did a lot of engagement and kind of advertising to their consumers to make sure hygiene and safety concerns wasn't an issue. I think this is another aspect of circular economy. Often for reuse, consumers have concerns around hygiene, around safety. They're thinking, is it really okay to drink a drink from a bottle that someone else has drank from, even if obviously it has been processed, but these are concerns people have, and it's human nature. So they set up this return system so they can recollect their bottles, but they also did a lot of engagement and a lot of kind of advertising to say to their consumers, this is how we do it. It is completely safe. There are no hygiene issues because we have tested it, and because of that, their return take back scheme was a success. So I found that quite interesting too. It's less on the innovation around what is in the packaging, but it really demonstrates how a lot of these systems sometimes it is just consumer awareness on why it's different to what we're used to, but why it is good for the environment and also safe for them. So I found that quite interesting too.
Yeah, and I love the storytelling. I'm always speaking about that in training, that share your stories, because sometimes companies make decisions about something that's going to make them more sustainable, and they don't tell people, and then there's a backlash, and actually they should share the story. I think people are so worried that there's going to be backlash on the decisions that they make, but actually if you take the customer on the journey with you, then there's going to be much more response. You kind of mentioned there it's about the deposit return scheme. That's something that you worked on in Singapore, wasn't it? Tell us a little bit more about that. I'm surprised that we don't see that here so much more. Do you think it's going to be coming? How does it work, and what lessons can we learn from what Singapore have done?
Yeah, definitely. So I believe this government has said they're still committed to a deposit return scheme. So hopefully we will get one in the UK, fingers crossed. But a deposit return scheme is a really fascinating example of putting together consumer behavior, human nature, convenience, to increase the recycling of packaging, usually bottles. So in Singapore, it was plastic bottles, aluminium cans, and glass cartons, which is another quite common form of packaging, wasn't included, mainly because cartons are often made of they're usually very hard to recycle because of the paper outside and usually a plastic lining inside. So they are an example of multi-material, multi-layer packaging. So in Singapore, so to kind of give some context, what a deposit return scheme is whenever you buy a drink, you pay a deposit on that packaging. Usually the deposit is modulated based on what kind of packaging it is, or sometimes it is a flat deposit as well. This can be, 10 cents, 5 cents. It varies per region. And then you drink a drink, and then you go to what you call either a reverse vending machine or the till of a supermarket or a shop, and you return your drink and you get your money back. And this is one, it's very fun in Germany. I put my drinks in the bottles in a reverse vending machine in the shop, and I remember I got my partner to film me because I hadn't used one before because we don't have one here, and he was like, "You're such an environmentalist," but it was great. Um, and it's great because it's a separate collection system, and separate collection means there's less cost involved in separating out all the different waste. It means it's usually very high quality recycling that can be produced from it, and it also means usually this is how it is in Singapore, that the drinks manufacturers gets back that recycled content as well to continuously reuse for the same purpose. So if you remember earlier, I was talking about materials being used at their highest value for longer, and this is an example of it, because it means that producers of drinks can get the recycled content to reuse in their bottles. It's a closed loop system. Instead of an open loop system, putting the recycled content on kind of the open market, which is part of the reason why recycled content is very costly, because there's so much competition for it. So that's what a deposit return scheme is. And in Singapore, it's going to be rolled out. I think it's been approved this year, and it's going to be rolled out, I think, next year or in 2026. The learnings I took from it was, one, people want their money back. People want to get their money back.
Absolutely.
So it is a way to incentivize that. You've paid a bit extra for this bottle, so collect it, put it back, and you're going to get your money back, and it incentivizes that. Another thing really important about deposit return schemes is convenience. It's that these stations to return your bottles need to be in places like transport hubs, supermarkets. In Singapore, a lot of people live in very large, they call it housing development blocks, but they are government run kind of flats where a lot of people live. So it makes sense to have a return vending machine there. Convenience is very important. People do want to get their money back, but if they have to go out of their way to do it, they're less likely to do it, especially when it's only a couple cents per bottle. Convenience is super important. And I really like this scheme because I really feel like it ingrains recycling into, especially young people, into school children. If this is a system that they've grown up using, it highlights the importance of recycling. It highlights the importance that this bottle, even though you've bought it for quite cheaply from a supermarket, has a cost, and we need to look after it. We need to make sure that we put it back in the system so it can be reused. It does have an impact. So I think that's great to raise awareness and educate the young people on it, and hopefully, when they're adults, it's ingrained in their ways of living. And then I think what is really fascinating as well about deposit return schemes is they're run by a producer responsibility organization, who manages the system, creates the take backs. They organize it, and this is important to, like I kind of said before, put the responsibility on the industry. Some regions, some deposit return schemes, they had kind of legislated it in terms of, they legislated how it works, the targets, how much money they're giving, but then they haven't updated it. And I think it's really important that the industry, who really are on the ground of understanding how recycling works, the recycling rates, what's working, what's not, are responsible for it, because they can continuously improve the system. Deposit return schemes work best when the government says, this is mandatory now, you guys have to do it, the recycling rate is X, go figure it out.
Yeah.
And they can use that, they know they need to do it, but they can decide how best to do it and continuously improve the system without having to go through a kind of quite long, onerous regulatory process if they want to make changes. So that's another thing that's really important. And yeah, I think it's such a great way to increase recycling. You know, we've seen recycling rates from deposit return schemes be between 80 to 98% due to it. And yeah, a great system that I really hope every country does. Hopefully the UK will get one soon.
Yeah, I hope so too. And even if it is from companies where they say, you know, if you buy our product and it might be a bit more expensive, but if you return the packaging, that you'll get money off of your not next product. And
Mhm.
that, you know, I love that sort of returning something to get money off, and it helps with that circular economy as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely helps the circular economy, and it increases the convenience. You know, if
Yeah.
you always shop in a supermarket, you just take your bottles there, return
Yeah.
it, you get money off your next shop. It's super simple and convenient for the consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. Last couple of questions now. What future trends do you see in sustainable packaging
Mhm.
and the circular economy? What's coming up?
Yeah, so I definitely see reuse systems scaling up. I see that through a couple ways. I see that through legislation, creating reuse targets. And when a government mandates it, the industry usually complies. But from the government mandating it, it means it can be more cohesive. It means it can be scaled up, wider than what we see right now. Tends to be pilot schemes in lots of different regions, which isn't as effective as if it's mandated from the top. So that's something I see coming up. Eco design requirements as well. This is something that the EU actually just passed quite recently. Eco design requirements for durability, for modularity. Modularity is the feasibility of being able to separate out a product. It's often used for things like durable goods, but it can be used for packaging too. Separating out so you can separate two different parts very easily, and then recycle both of them. Things like labels, which used to be incredibly stuck on to a bottle, which would affect the recycling. Things like being able to separate that out so you can feasibly recycle packaging. So yeah, eco design requirements as well, and then mandatory reporting, mandatory disclosure. The EU has recently approved the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, and that's going to be mandatory for all companies based in the EU or kind of sell goods in the EU. Mandatory reporting is definitely the trajectory it's going on. CSRD do have a very large, very comprehensive module on resource use and circular economy, E5, where it asks questions such as the recycled content of your products, the end of life management of your products, how much is being recovered, so reused, recycled, how much is being sent to landfill, incinerated. Have you increased the durability, the modularity of it? And this is something that I think companies aren't going to be able to escape from. In some countries like Singapore, they have recently said they're going to make ISSB, climate reporting, mandatory for financial institutions. So that's definitely their trajectory. And I think we're going to see a lot of innovations in materials. There's a lot of different startups doing really incredible things on creating packaging from mycelium, creating packaging which you can biodegrade in water with some UV light. Very, very interesting. Quite nature, I would say quite nature focused, like based on the natural systems that we see already, and taking that and innovating packaging for it. So yeah, I think it's a very exciting time. I think that we are going to see the circular economy progressing through lots of different avenues, through legislation, through financial institutions, creating, circular bonds and funds, through startups innovating and corporations innovating, and also through consumer awareness and behavior change too.
Yeah. And then thank you. That's really exciting to think about what is coming. But my final question would be, what advice would you give to the everyday consumer that wants to make more sustainable choices regarding packaging and waste, just going out there, doing their daily shop? What would be your tip that they should be aware of and can do more of?
Yeah, definitely. I think my number one tip would be, look for the products which don't have any packaging at all. Look for bulk stores where you can take your own jar and fill it up. I do appreciate sometimes they're not everywhere. They're not in every single region, and they can be more expensive. But if you can afford it, go do that. It's a fun experience, I would say, and quite novel. Look for that. I would say, when you're in a supermarket, look at the brands that are trying. Look at the brands which are selling products in bulk, so you can go home and refill it yourself. And also, I would say, put pressure as well on the brands you do buy from. Let them know that you want more sustainable packaging. You want reusable packaging, and you want to make sure that the packaging you buy has increased recycled content, because you're a consumer and they want you to spend your money with them. And if you say you're not going to, they will start making changes. So I would say that, I would say in general, avoid any single-use plastic that you don't necessarily need. I feel like this is becoming quite the norm now, but remember your reusable coffee cup. If you go to a restaurant and you think, okay, I've been here before, they give a lot of food, take your Tupperware, from home. And it can mean a slightly different behavior initially, but once you start doing it multiple times, it will become, second nature. But yeah, so I think, one, avoid single-use plastics where possible. Two, look out for the brands in supermarkets which are providing refill options, especially for things like soap, for laundry detergent. Go try a bulk store if it's near you, and take your jars, refill up your grains, your beans, whatnot. And put pressure on the companies you buy from, and let them know you want more sustainable packaging.
That's amazing. Honestly, I've learned so much from this conversation. Even though we'd spoken before, I still, every time we've had a conversation, I've really learned from you. I can't wait to put this out. I find it so fascinating and so complex. And, I think that's the biggest thing. But I really, really appreciate your time, your experience. Just the work that you're doing is so important, and yeah, it's really good to hear everything that you're saying, everything that people can do, that businesses can do, and I do hope that this helps towards a more sustainable future for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.